from the WKYT studios in Lexington, this is Kentucky Newsmakers with Bill Bryant.
Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, hoping your weekend is going well. Lexington will host the Breeders' Cup next year. How could that impact the region's economy? Commerce Lexington's Bob Quick will join us shortly to talk about that and business trends and that big leadership trip to Charlotte, which created some exciting buzz. That's coming up just a little later. But first, you know about all the violence last weekend in Lexington. A deadly series of shootings, a stabbing, and a carjacking involving young women shook the city, known more for history and horses than violent crime. Lexington Mayor Jim Gray held a news conference and talked about increased police efforts, but his opponent in this November's election, former police chief Anthony Beatty, went before the cameras and asked whether citizens feel they're safe in Lexington. Beatty also used his news conference to talk about what he calls a tarnished relationship between the city and UK in light of the funding drama surrounding a proposal to renovate Rupp Arena. Candidate for Lexington Mayor Anthony Beatty is joining us today on Kentucky Newsmakers. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Bill, we appreciate you having us again.
Well, you called a news conference after that weekend of violence, and then the mayor scheduled one after you called yours, but he held his right before yours and talked about the city's response to the wave of violence. Is the city of Lexington responding appropriately by shuffling some resources?
Well, Bill, I have to answer that by saying that I've been saying for several months now that Lexington was on the trend of some of the problems that we've seen in other communities in terms of crime and how they drive how our community reacts. And so we have been slow to react to the trend that we see coming now in terms of the types, the nature of the crime, the violence, the level of violence, certainly the intensity and the frequency of crime. And so we have been slow to respond to that, and we're starting to see the aftermath of not doing the right thing with providing resources, the ability for public safety and law enforcement to respond in a proactive fashion.
When you say slow to respond to a trend, do you mean strictly in policing, or are you talking about something that's more community and broad-based?
Community and broad-based, but the major player, the key component of this is certainly public safety, that being police and fire and E911, corrections, all the people who are in the lead in dealing with safety. Police number one, because they're on the forefront of dealing with the crimes and the problems that we have to deal with. And so I'm talking about the whole package here, if you will, of all the players, but specifically police. We knew back in the early 2000s when we had built a very safe city, became recognized as one of the 5 safest cities in the country, that we had to build on police staffing, facilities, equipment, training, and then staffing the numbers up as the population grew. And we were moving towards that. And so we had moved up to a number around 600 police officers with the ability then to staff specialized units, whether it be robbery, homicide, selective enforcement, DARE, POW, those things that had to happen. And so we were able to do that with the staffing. But since then, the numbers have been impacted negatively in that we've lost officers in terms of the authorized trend.
As you know, the plan is to hire more officers, sure. and the mayor said that he is shifting resources, and that resources are being shifted to robbery, homicide within the police department. But you have still been critical of even what has been done here lately.
Yeah, I'm critical because we should not have gotten to this point. Energy and emphasis should have been placed on this. Police are very adept and have the skills at analyzing the crime patterns and trends and seeing where they're going with dealing with that. And so they can best say what they need in terms of staffing and equipment. We did not see this coming. We didn't, and I'm not saying police did this, but certainly we didn't in the leadership provide them what they needed. When we reduced staffing levels of police by 40 officers in 1 year and reauthorized them at that strength, a whole lot of things have to be changed inside the police department to make them operate efficiently, which means they move away from operational things, whether it's answering calls for service, traffic details, or specialized units. And so there are some glaring needs to enhance police services, not only just to enhance the services, but the visibility that we had in the community with the number of officers we had is very woefully lacking if you look around our community now without the cars in the home fleet plan being visible.
I want to put a question to you that you put to the cameras that day, that you put out when you held your news conference, right. And that is, do you feel safe in Lexington?
Right. And this is not to scare the citizens, but I simply asked the question, do you feel safe in Lexington today? Do you feel safer than you did 5, 6, 10 years ago? And I think if we watch what's happening on the news, most people will tell you they do not. They tell me that as I traveled around the community, and I'm sure they're telling the city leadership that they do not feel safe. Back in the 2000s, when we had ramped up this world-class agency, not only did you feel safe, the numbers indicated it, but there was just this aura of safety. Lexington felt like a good place to come and live and work and then just enjoy it. I don't think that's the case today when you have this open randomness and random violence.
Do you think that there are other influences outside the community that are coming in that are leading to some of this, and that there is some need to get a handle on that?
Yeah, that's the tricky piece of this bill. There's a trickle-down effect. Once the community gets labeled as branded as a place to come and commit crime because there's no fear of apprehension, there's no true heavy police presence, there's no visibility, then the community loses trust in the agency to be able to perform, and therefore those who intend to commit criminal acts to be problems move into the community, and it just starts to manifest itself. And then you follow the trend of some of these other larger cities who have seen this happen, who then have to ramp up and try to react to it. And we can name the cities who've done it. We know that they've gone through this where we are now. We need to nip it in the bud now.
What can a mayor do from the top office of city government in terms of setting a tone, in terms of literally dictating how the police department will be run, and in reaching out to a community?
Yeah. First of all, let me say, as a mayor, you certainly provide the tools, the equipment, the facilities, and the leadership for the law enforcement and the public safety community to do their job. They have the skills, they have the knowledge, so the mayor is not involved with the day-to-day operation. But I see the mayor's job, number one, in leadership, is to make sure that they have your support, that being the mayor. Number two, provide them with the financing and the equipment and facilities that they need. And then number three, be there with them shoulder to shoulder when you see these problems happening in an area. Do
your public safety concerns go beyond the police department?
Yeah, I think when we talk about public safety, we have to put everything together because they have a symbiotic relationship. They work together to perform public safety. So police and fire respond together a lot, so there are issues and needs for fire. Certainly E911 is the first line that most citizens have contact with, and there are some things that we're working on now we know that we have to enhance for E911. And then corrections is another major piece of this. And then all of that in terms of how it interacts with the judicial system, the prosecutors, the courts, and the judges. So you have to look at the whole project, the whole group, but focus in on public safety since it's the first line of defense.
Were you surprised that Mayor Gray called a news conference after you had called yours and set his for 2 hours before yours?
I'm somewhat surprised given the nature and the fact that this has been going on for many years now. If we look at what's happened to the funding for public safety as it's been cut, and now we're trying to ramp it back up, I was surprised that it was a reactionary press conference called. I'd actually called the press conference to talk about the Rupp Arena project because I was indisposed last week when this all happened, but I still wanted to talk about public safety, so somewhat surprised that it happened.
But was it good politics on his part to head off your news conference?
I can't answer that, Bill.
You, as you said, you talked about Rupp Arena, which Mayor Gray wants to renovate and also build a new convention center and an arts district around it. Now that he has suspended action on that, stopped that, does that take this off the table as an issue in this fall campaign?
I don't see how it can take it off the table, not just for the campaign, but for our community. When we have invested, we, being the community, have invested $5 million of public money in a project in a planning phase. I don't see how we can take it off the table. I think the public still has the right to know how the funds were spent, what the plans were. We need to look at that now so that as plans move forward in the future, we have this to operate from and understand fully how we got to this point.
You have said that you favor a redo for Rupp Arena. Is it realistic, Mr. Beatty, to think, though, that that could be done solely with private dollars or money that could be raised in some way?
In today's world, Bill, anything is possible. Let me say that, that there's plenty of, not plenty, but there's support out there, I'm sure, if the right folks are at the table discussing the project and how we move it forward. If the right folks are at the table, yes, that's very possible. I would only point to the example of what's happened on the University of Kentucky's campus in terms of the major renovation without the use of any public dollars. And so there are investors out there who will invest in the projects, particularly something with the brand of Rupp Arena and UK basketball. I'm sure that there would be folks out there, if it's done the right way, if everyone is brought to the table in a discussion. Certainly can be, excuse me.
Go ahead. Did he do the right thing by suspending at this point?
At this point, it's probably the best thing to do. We had no way to fund from the public sector locally, and no way to fund from the state, and then we're not sure where the rest of the funding is coming from. So at this point, I don't know we had any other options because we could prolong this thing. We cannot afford to spend any more public dollars in development until we know where the project's going. So how's the funding, who's involved, who's at the table, and where's the project going?
All right, we'll be spending a couple more minutes with candidate for Lexington Mayor Anthony Beatty in just a moment. Also, Bob Quick of the Commerce Lexington is going to talk about the Breeders' Cup and some other business trends in the Bluegrass. Coming up on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Stay with us this morning. Welcome back into Kentucky Newsmakers here on WKYT as we continue our discussion today with Anthony Beatty, candidate for Lexington Mayor. He and incumbent Mayor Jim Gray survived the May primary and move on. You were considerably behind Mayor Gray, but do you feel good about where you finished in that primary?
Yeah, we feel very good about where we are in terms of a first-time candidate and about 2 months of campaigning to be able to finish with that percentage. We know now where we have to work hard to overcome some of the areas that we did win, and we intend to do that. So we feel very good about where we are. So we're working very hard to overcome that.
You've talked about the need for more attention to neighborhoods in Lexington, and you run a slogan that's something along the lines of a mayor for all of Lexington. What exactly should the city administration be doing in that regard that you don't think is getting done?
Yeah, we have to focus in on all of Lexington, all the neighborhoods, all the communities, all the people, all the families, all the time. I don't feel that we've done that. I think we focused a lot of time and energy on downtown. And don't get me wrong, downtown is very vital. It has to happen. We have to develop it. But at the same time, we need some balance in where we are focusing energy in the areas away from downtown. And so we hear loud and clear when we're out talking to people that they just don't feel like parts of Lexington are included in the discussion of where Lexington is going. So all of Lexington is critical for me in terms of who we are, where we are, and certainly the neighborhoods and the people who live in them. So we're going to focus energy there and make sure we can develop Lexington from the inside out.
Lexington will host the Breeders' Cup next year at Keeneland, and whoever is elected mayor will have a lot of responsibilities surrounding that and getting ready and, of course, playing a host to the crowd that will be here. Does the city have a lot of work ahead to get ready to be in the world spotlight in that way?
Yeah, we do, Bill. But, you know, Lexington is a great city for that. We've hosted so many events before, so many people and so many folks who've been involved with a lot of skill and a lot of knowledge. We were able to ramp up very comfortably for the World Equestrian Games, which brought a lot more folks to Lexington than will the Breeders' Cup. But certainly we have the skill and the ability and the people who can pull it off, so no question that we can do it. We'll be admirable hosts for the folks coming to Lexington. They'll enjoy themselves. I know it'll be a safe, fun environment, so no question that we can and will pull off an excellent Breeders' Cup for the folks.
Are you enjoying this campaign?
Yeah, I am. It's different. Being a police chief certainly was high stress, and being in campaign mode is high stress. But it's again, it has some kind of intrinsic reward, and I think the reward is, the reward is knowing that you can make Lexington a better place for everyone. That's the only reason you get into a race like this, because it's a grueling grind that you have to really be involved to be a part of. As
you move into the heat of summer and then the fall race, how do you see this campaign unfolding?
I think it's going to be a very close race, and I think we will win this race given the number of volunteers, the people that we have working for us, working behind the scene, the level of support, and we've got this groundswell of support we're feeling. So I see it being a very close race, but I feel that we will win this race in the fall, and we will work hard to make Lexington a better place for everyone.
Appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you.
Anthony Beatty, the former police chief of Lexington and now candidate for Lexington mayor in the fall election. All right, we're back in just a moment. We will be visiting with Bob Quick of Commerce Lexington. We'll talk about business trends and about the big challenge of the Breeders' Cup coming to Lexington. Next on WKYT. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT. Business could be better everywhere as America continues to come back from the Great Recession, but there are bright spots in the country and here in the Bluegrass. Commerce Lexington does what it can to support businesses and advocate positions that make for a strong business climate. About 200 area leaders recently visited Charlotte, North Carolina to compare notes and generate some ideas. Those leadership trips also bring some new ideas to the table locally. Lexington is getting the Breeders' Cup, a huge announcement. What kind of challenge will that be in the year ahead? An opportunity. Bob Quick is here from Commerce Lexington. We welcome him. Thanks for coming. You said 14 years. It has flown, hasn't it?
It has flown by. Oh
right.
my. Yeah.
And I understand congratulations in order to the Chamber being chosen one of the top 4 in the nation.
In the nation. In the largest category of all the big mega chambers. So I'm not sure how we got that category, Bill, but you know, we're ready to take them on in August and try to become that #1.
Great. What was your reaction to this huge announcement that the Breeders' Cup is coming to Lexington? You brought a Breeders' Cup cap in here.
I did. All things will be purple come 2015 at the end of October. Breeders' Cup's a big deal. You know, it's the World Cup, it's the World Series, it's the big mega championship event of the equine industry, and to have it, the equine world, and to have it in the home of the thoroughbred industry is very significant. You know, we often think of the World Equestrian Games, but let me tell you, this is going to be another one of those just incredible global iconic events. It's right here. We'll have the world stage, and it'll have a huge impact not only here locally, economically, and from a social standpoint. It'll have a huge impact on us globally when we're traveling and the interactions we get overseas.
What does it say about Lexington and the business climate and the community here to be in a position to lure something like that?
Well, it says we're a very savvy community. It says that Keeneland and the horse industry here is very solid. It says that we are very iconic worldwide. These decisions aren't made easily. This means we have the infrastructure. This means we've got from all the services needed to bring the world here to compete. It also says that we're savvy to know how to treat these folks when they're in, to work with them. The World Equestrian Games I often go back to, we won the world's heart by Kentuckians being Kentuckians. That genuine friendship interaction, we won the world over, and you saw a lot of equine interest come back in and start buying farms here after that event was over. To me, this is the iconic event of all. This is the grand championship event. This is what you live and die for in the equine world, and it's here. Now we just have to make sure we're closely with Keeneland. They'll be the general on this. They'll tell us what we need to do, where, when, and how. We just need to pay close attention to their leadership because they got us these games and they know what they're doing.
What could the economic impact of this be on the region?
Well, you know, you're hearing numbers thrown around, 50 million plus. I've heard way up of that. But let me tell you, worldwide, and I don't know how you characterize this, the significance of this being in Lexington gives us a stake. So you've got the premier equine auction house in Keeneland. Now you add this event to it, and you've got all these iconic farms. You've got the top veterinarian hospitals and clinics in the world. You got the jockeys. You got the breeders. We've got it all. Now it just says, it just really ups our game and puts us on a stage with the elites, the best. And the other thing is we are one of the best, one of the elites, and now it just really confirms and magnifies that much more. So when we travel overseas, it'll be a big deal for us.
You called Keeneland the general in this, and they may be reaching out for help and volunteers. Absolutely. And all of that. How do you expect the business community to respond to try to maximize the potential of this opportunity with the Breeders' Cup?
Well, first of all, listen to what Keeneland leaders tell us that they need, and then they've already got a lot of organizational thought in mind about what the community needs to do. I mean, they put a lot of thought, deep thought into this. Listen to what they tell us. I was involved in a world event back in the late 80s and 1988. And let me tell you, do what the folks tell you, because they know the market coming in, they know the people, and they know what they need. Commerce Lexington will do a lot of things that might be visible and behind the scenes, but we'll do the things that have to be done to make this a successful event. So if you're in business, don't go and over-inventory product thinking everybody's just going to come in and buy. They might not, but Keeneland will be able to give a lot of details on what we need to do to prepare and then to present ourselves in a very respectable way.
And I would just take it that as we move closer in the time frame, then those directives will be a little more clear.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Recently, about 200 area leaders flew down to Charlotte, that 1-hour trip down there to the hub where they put you out on the ground sometimes.
Absolutely, yep.
And you talked about this, of course, this was a joint venture with Louisville.
Absolutely.
Talked about many things, lots of topics. What were your takeaways?
Well, let me also add, so 200 people from Central Kentucky, from Lexington, and another 100 from Louisville. So when you put the key community and business leaders together, you've got quite an audience of folks that we get to know each other better, we get to build a trust, we get to build a rapport. Then when you get into the issues, they have a different meaning. There's just a different way that we conduct ourselves, because when you get to know someone, you really can fish out and find out what's really important to us and what we need to do together. We have discussions amongst each other on easy topics, and we have discussions on topics not so easy. You know, the things that we've got to figure out, how do we bridge between our communities. So when we went there, Charlotte is a regional hub. They do economic development from a regional standpoint, but they connect with a lot of cities and towns around them, and so we learned what works, what doesn't work. And you know, Charlotte may be on a much larger scale than us, but everything's scalable, and you learn what's worked and what hasn't worked. We met with Hugh McCall, the guy who built the Bank of America empire. We weren't able to get him until the last day. The Charlotte Chamber president called him and said, "Will you come speak to this group?" And he came. And to hear how they built a public-private, how they leveraged public-private resources for the good of all. And they talked about when it was just the public sector, just the private sector, things failed. Things didn't gel. They didn't work. They couldn't come together on deciding how the community ought to go forward. So we really learned a lot about the things that worked and didn't. The best thing to do is talk to the people there on the ground, talk to the companies. So we would bring them in and have discussions about workforce and regionalism and what works and what doesn't. And they're very honest with you. They're very candid. And so we learned a lot of things that really kind of make perfect sense to us. And we learned new things about new trends that could be coming down the road that you just got to stay on top of. Nothing earth-shaking, but when we get back, and this was our 74th trip, second time with Louisville leaders, when you put all that information you put together and you look at the past couple of trips, I mean, we've had a lot of outcomes from our trips over the years. And again, the BEAM initiative came out of Pittsburgh, the Bluegrass Economic Advancement Movement of the two mayors of super region. Just had the Global Cities Initiative yesterday over in Louisville. We're talking about, we are a huge global community here, in large part because of Keeneland, the auction house, Tipton, and other places, but we are on a global stage, and we have to keep building our presence there and become even more savvy and smarter. So again, a lot of takeaways. We learned some cool stuff they did. We get involved in the arts. We get involved in the not just economic development and key core business things, but the arts are economic development. So we start to weave in a lot of other topics.
Well, the Ann Arbor, Michigan trip brought a lot of discussion about town gown, kind of trying to bring the two together, and that has happened to a great extent.
Look at the success downtown with the university.
You all had one awkward thing going on while you were in Charlotte. They were throwing the mayor in jail down there, right? I mean,
they were our last day. He was being arraigned.
Right.
But let me. And here's what it's all about. We got to witness Mayor Claude Felter, who's the mayor that was selected to replace him. Kind of find out close friends with Bill Lear, so we had a tie to Lexington. Yep. But let me tell you something. That man has really solidified that town. What could have broken up any city in America could have really divided it, caused a lot of chaos. Mayor Claude Felter came in and really rallied the troops. Super smart, down-to-earth leader. So we got to watch two things, an arraignment as we were flying out, but we also got to watch a man move into a leadership role in a delicate time, and we watched how, and he talked with us about how he was pulling together a community in a region. Incredible.
You've been around, as we mentioned, about 14 years or so. Came here from Evansville, Indiana, and you've done some other chamber work. What do the region and the state still need to do to create a better business climate?
Well, first of all, we have to know where our field of play is. We're a global region. The horse industry, the auto industry, advanced manufacturing. So we've just been working with our two mayors, Louisville, Lexington, working on a global cities initiative with J.P. Morgan Chase and Brookings Institution. First of all, we have to know who we are, We have to look at the data of what we need to do to advance ourselves. So we may be one of the leaders in the world for advanced manufacturing, and we are. What do we do to not only sustain it, but to grow it, to build it? What do we do in workforce? What do we do more in exports? So we always have to be very cautious of quality of place, because people are moving into our community and then finding jobs. We also have to remember who our base of people here and how we're training and building a capacity for a workforce, so that companies want to expand here, locate here. We have a lot of startups. And why? Because they love the environment. So you can never forget that quality of place and the importance of it. We also have to look at innovation. What are we doing different today, and what's happening in the world? The big thing I took away from the international initiatives that we've been doing is the simple fact, Bill, that we've got to keep up with super regions in the world. We're a tiny little dot, even when you put Louisville and Lexington together. That's why that's so important. And even Northern Kentucky, as we keep building this out, Kentucky has to figure out how we all come together and have a good tax base, have a good cost base, but also how we're innovative, and we're always looking to up our strengths.
Another leg of the stool, obviously, is education, and there have been questions raised about the finances in the Fayette County public school system. A state audit is underway now. You recently appeared before the school board. Your purpose in that?
We want to make sure everybody knows we have a lot of confidence in Tom Shelton and in the school board, and we don't want to see education divided like it used to be many years ago. Tom is a very solid leader. He is excellent with finances, and what we want to make sure is that we're glad that Adam Edlin's in, his staff are looking at the books. Amen. And we want to make sure that what we do around education is important. We got to keep transforming it and upping our game there.
Concerned about the shortfall, though? There's
no shortfall. I mean, the shortfall they're talking about, you got to make cuts. It's 5% of the budget. Tom is exactly right to say if you're short, you can't keep living off your reserves. And so they've found great ways to be able to try to minimize the impacts. And then where there are impacts, we've got to sit down as a community and figure out how do we overcome those.
A few seconds left, a trip to Dubai for the Chamber, right?
October 18th to 26th, selling like hotcakes. So it's a phenomenal trip. I call it a 5-star trip. You go see the best of one of the most incredible countries in the world. And if you're interested, contact Katie Hartwig at our office, and we'll be more than happy to talk with you and get you involved.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. I'll see you bright and early this week on WKYT. This morning we start at 4:30 a.m., also mid-morning at 10, and WKYT News at noon. Have a good week ahead.